Morning, everyone. All right, this week is Parshas Nasso, but we're not going to really look at the Parsha. I'm just going to run through it in a couple of quick minutes just to say what's in the Parsha. Not going to discuss anything really in it.
Do you want us to have those blue books?
No.
Oh.
No, we don't need it. We're not going to go in detail in there. We're going to jump around a little bit, so it's easier not to. And obviously, tomorrow night is the Yom Tov of Shavuos. Of all the Yom Tovim that most Jewish people know about, Shavuos is the one that people know the least about. And we'll come back to that. Okay, Parshas Nasso. So we had Bar Midbar last week, we have Nasso this week. Almost every year Nasso is the week after Shavuos. Every now and again it's before, but it's almost all the time the week after. It's the longest Parsha in terms of a regular Parsha, 176 verses. And most of that is because the back half of the Parsha, which we'll come to. Just quickly what it goes through. Last week we were discussing the families of the Leviim and what their responsibilities were. Last week's Parsha ended with the family of Kahas and their responsibility. This week starts with Gershon and Merari, the two other families of Leviim, what their responsibilities were vis-a-vis the Mishkan, the tabernacle, in terms of what they would carry when we were moving through the desert. Adds up the totals. Moshe says, right, we need to get rid of anybody who's got tsaras, who's got tsaras was a spiritual disease that manifested itself physically in a person's skin or on their clothing or later on in Israel on houses. The main reason people got tsaras was because of Lashon Hora, but various other sins caused it. So person spoke Lashon Hora and they suddenly got a thing on their arm or their head or wherever it was. Oh, maybe I should think about what I'm saying. We don't have that anymore, and we need to know that we should be careful. Okay, the Torah then discusses in quite a lot of detail what happens with a woman who's suspected of being with another married woman who's suspected of being with another man. She's called a soita. Her husband warns her if she is witnessed as going into some form of seclusion with the other man, then she could be tested with bitter water. She'd have to drink these waters, which Hashem's name is actually erased. It's written onto parchment, put into the water, and she's made to drink this. If she is guilty, and if the husband is innocent, if he hasn't done anything wrong, then she would die a terrible death by exploding, essentially. The waters would go into her, and her stomach and her thighs would explode. As would the man she was with. It's not a one-off punishment. If she was innocent, there was an incredible miracle that she would go back to her husband and they would have the most incredible children. Psychologically, how that works in terms of a husband and wife relationship where he's accusing her of adultery and suddenly they're back together and it's a phenomenal thing, but that's something that happened in those times.
And does the boyfriend also have to drink all his
No, only she does, but he will explode as well. He will die.
If they're guilty.
If they were guilty, yes. If the husband had done something wrong as well,
she's absolved.
then she'd drink the waters and nothing would happen to her because he was guilty. So he's got to know what he's doing as well. There's a story in the Gemara where there were identical twins, and she sent her sister there, and she waited outside. The wife was at home, and the sister obviously nothing happened to her, and the sister came back and gave her a hug and a kiss, and she died. Some of the water was still attached. The story in the Gemara. Okay. The Gemara then says anybody who sees a soita, the woman, in her disgrace at that point in time, she's degraded. Things are done to her that make her really feel down because she's told over and over again, are you sure you want to drink these waters? Are you sure you're innocent? Because you know what's going to happen to you. Anybody who sees a soita in that state should become a Nazir. And the next Parsha, the next section of the Torah is about the Nazirite. The Nazir is a person who takes on a vow not to drink wine, not to cut their hair, and not to come in contact with the dead. Three things. Generally, the most famous Nazir is Samson, Shimshon. He was a Nazir from birth. There's a few types of Nazirim. A Nazir for life, a person who takes it on for life, today can be still, and there are a few people in the world, I've seen an interview with one, who are Nazirim today. They don't cut their hair, they don't drink wine, have grape products, and it's any grape product. It's you can't have grapeseed oil. Can't eat grapes, can't drink wine, anything like that. How they handle Pesach, I don't know. Generally, a Nazir was for 30 days, and it so happens that we are learning Mishnah of Nazir at the moment. We're towards about halfway through Mishnah Nazir, so that's what this expansion. Generally, a Nazir was for 30 days, but it could be for longer. And at the end of all of that, to say took on person, he or she can take on Naziris. At the end of the process, they'd have to bring 3 offerings, as well as some loaves of bread, which were each shared around, and they'd have to shave completely because of the not cutting of the hair. It's the only time a Jewish man is allowed to shave, as in his payers, his beard, with a razor. It's a commandment to shave completely, the whole head, bald men, women, anybody who took on Naziris, and then grow hair again. So that was the whole process of Naziris. Not allowed to come in contact with the dead. If they came in contact with the dead, then there was, they'd have to go through a process of shaving and bringing offerings, and then start their Naziris again for 30 days. We then have the Birkat Kohanim, the 3 blessings that the Kohanim give to the people. We only do it in Ashkenazi shuls out of Israel on Yom Tov, in Musaf. In Israel, it's done every single day. In Shachris, when there's Musaf, it's done Shachris Musaf. And on a fast day, it's done Shachris Musaf and Mincha, because Kohen can only do Birkat Kohanim when he hasn't had anything to drink. So in Shachris, in Musaf, normally we're not eaten anything yet. On Simchas Torah, for example, our custom is we do it in the morning in Shachris, not in Musaf, because most shuls have a Kiddush at some point before Musaf. And therefore, once we've had something to drink, or even could have had something to drink, we don't duchen in Musaf outside of Israel. In Israel, duchening is every day, and in the Sephardi world, duchening is every day. Most Sephardim do duchen every day. I say in Israel, most of Israel, certainly all of Yerushalayim for sure, and most other communities have taken on around Israel. One of the reasons why I love going to Israel, it's only one of them. Okay. And then from here, Chamishi, the 5th Aliyah, Shishi and Shvi, the 6th and 7th Aliyah, is all about the offerings brought by the tribal leaders. The 12 tribal leaders all had a thought, a prophecy, something put into them, or they came out that they should bring a dedication offering to the Mishkan. To the tabernacle, they need to bring something. And it goes through all 12 of them, exactly what they brought. And they all brought the exact same thing. They didn't get together and meet the day before and say, all right, let's bring this. It came to them and this is what they felt they should bring. And many of the commentaries go through and explain the significance of each of the things that they brought. But just to go through quickly, we'll just go through one of them to explain what they brought. Nachshon ben Aminadab, who was the leader of the tribe of Yehuda, his offering was a silver bowl which weighed 130 shekel, a silver basin weighing 70 shekel, both of them filled with fine flour, with oil for a korban mincha, meal offering, a gold ladle of 10 shekels filled with incense, a young bull, a ram, a sheep in its first year for an elevation offering, a goat for a sin offering, and for a feast peace offering, 2 cattle, 5 rams, 5 he-goats, 5 sheep in their first year. That's what he offered. And it goes through, and the only differences essentially between each of them is the name of the leader and his tribe, mentioned twice. Goes through all 12 of them. And then it totals them all. It tells exactly what was brought by all of them. And the Parsha ends that Moshe goes into the Mishkan. Moshe goes into, when Moshe arrived at the tent meeting to speak to Hashem, he heard the voice speaking from the top of the cover of the Aron, so where the cherubim were, the cherubs, Hashem's voice came through there. That was the point where heaven kissed earth, let's put it that way, where Hashem, and in the temple, that was the same thing. That's the holiest part of the universe, of the world, where Hashem, Shekhinah, his presence, comes down to rest on the world. And Hashem spoke to him. Aaron HaKohen didn't bring any offerings. He was upset. Next week's Parshas starts by Haloischa with the menorah, because Aaron is told, you will light the menorah forever, and forever means we still have the mitzvah of Hanukkah. So that's just the connection of the Parsha. That was 10 minutes exactly on the Parsha. Okay, excellent. Okay.
What happened to all the offerings that they brought?
Very depended on the offering. So,
What happened to all the sheep?
so it depended on what type of offering it was. Yes, so most offerings were brought, people would bring their own offerings. Most of them were brought as an offering that part of it was given to the Kohen or Kohanim, part of it was burnt up on the altar, and part of it was eaten, depending on offerings. Some of the offerings were burnt up completely. An oila offering, a burnt offering was burnt, the whole thing was offered to Hashem. But most offerings generally, the Nazir, for example, we were learning this morning about the Nazir. A Nazir would bring 3 offerings. One was a shlamim offering, which is a peace offering, together with 20 loaves of bread, of matzah bread. Interestingly enough, the temple was a chometz-free zone. It was all matzah. A person brought what's called a korban toida, a thanksgiving offering. They would bring an animal and 40 loaves of bread. 4 different types of bread, 10 loaves of each. The one of those types of bread was chometz. And the only other chometz offering brought in the temple at all was something called the shtei halechem, the 2 loaves, which were brought on Shavuos. The special offering for Shavuos was 2 loaves of chometz. And that connects back to Pesach when we bring the Omer offering, which was barley, the shtei halechem was wheat. And it's a whole progression, the whole thing of counting the Omer, of going from a low level on Pesach where we had nothing, through the 49 days of the counting of the Omer to get to Shavuos, where we can now bring wheat. Because in old times, until very recently, barley was animal food. People generally didn't eat barley, or very much of it, but they certainly ate wheat. And so we went from being lowly, you can put it like animals, on Pesach, when we start growing, we were down in Egypt at the 49th level of impurity. Hashem took us up to the 49th level of purity. We couldn't get to the 50th because that would mean we would know everything. But we got to the 49th level of purity when we received the Torah, which is a beautiful segue into Torah. Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to discuss. Well, to some degree. No, perfect. Okay.
What's the reason for cheese?
We'll come back to that. Dairy. We might come back to that. Let's see how we go. Okay. All right. So at the end of Shachris, or after Shachris in the morning, we've mentioned a few times, there's a few things put into the back of the Siddur. One of those is the 10 Commandments, which we'll discuss. That many people who will say the 10 Commandments, because there was a discussion amongst the rabbis, should we have the 10 Commandments in davening? It's like it's like the main thing. And they said no, because those 10 mitzvahs are part of the 613 mitzvahs. And we don't want to say that those 10 are more important than the others, because those are 10 statements as opposed to commandments or mitzvahs. The word 10 commandments, it's translated here like that, but the Hebrew is Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 statements, the 10 sayings that Hashem gave us. The Vilna Gaon, in fact, learns out all 613 mitzvahs within the 10 commandments. That's one of the things we say. Another thing we say is Rambam's 13 principles of faith, the Animamim. The famous Animamim that we're waiting for Mashiach is the 12th one of them. But Animamim are that we believe in Hashem, that's categorized into 3 sections. We've got that: the nature of belief in God, the authenticity of the Torah, and man's responsibility in this world, and reward and punishment. That's the 3 sections of the 13 principles of faith of the Rambam of Maimonides. Before that's brought are 6 things we need to remember. And what are those 6 things? The first one is remembrance of Exodus from Egypt. Remember the day of your departure from Egypt, all the days of your life. It's a verse in Deuteronomy chapter 16. I'm going to leave the second one out. The third one, remember what Amalek did to you. Amalek attacked you. Always remember that we need to wipe out the memory of Amalek. We discussed that Purim time. Haman was Amalekite. He was from Amalek, and we read that in Parshas Zachor. That's the reading of Parshas Zachor from the book of Devarim, from Deuteronomy chapter 25. remember the golden calf. And it doesn't actually say the words remember the golden calf. It says Zachor al tishchach, remember, don't forget. Es asher hiksafta es Hashem elakecha b'midbar, how you angered Hashem in the desert. 40 days after we got the Torah, we built the golden calf. Some people danced with the golden calf. Remember how you angered Hashem. Again, a pasuk in Devarim chapter 9. Then Zachor es asher asa Hashem elakecha leMiriam b'derech mitzvah Mitzrayim. Remember what Hashem your God did to Miriam on the way when you left Egypt. What did Hashem do to Miriam? He punished her for 7 days because she spoke Lashon Hora. She spoke about Moshe, Lashon Hora, and therefore Hashem said, you're getting tsaras. A person with tsaras, it used to be translated as leprosy. It has nothing to do with leprosy. But it was the closest physical malady, I think, that they could come up with in early translations. In most... Psoriasis is probably a good, and that's a connection. That's probably the root of the word as well in English. But it is a skin malady that affects a person spiritually. And a Metzora, a person who's got psoriasis, was kicked out of the camp. They weren't allowed into Yerushalayim. They were tamei, they were impure to a degree that they had to go out of the camp completely. And that's what happened to Miriam. And then the final one is Zachor es Yom HaShabbos Lekadsho, remember the day of Shabbos to keep it holy. And we do that in many different ways. One of the ways we do it in the morning when we say the Tehillim of the day, the Shir Shel Yom, it's we say Hayom Yom, or today was Hayom Yom Sheni b'Shabbos. Today is the second day of the Shabbos. Shebu Hayr Levim Omer Beis Hamikdash, that this is the Tehillim that the Levim would sing in the temple. And then we say the Tehillim of that day. The 7 days of the week have a different chapter of Psalms. Now, the one I missed out, the second one, is from a verse in Devarim in chapter 4, in Parshas Ve'eschanan. In Parshas Ve'eschanan is the second place that the story of what happened on Mount Sinai is brought, and the Ten Commandments are brought as well as the Shema in all of that as well. But from this verse here, or these verses, there's 2 verses, Raki Shama Lecha Ishmor Nafshcha Moed. Beware and guard yourself very carefully. Pen tishchach es hadvarim, lest you forget these things. Asher ro'u enecha, that your eyes have seen. Ufen yasur milvavecha, and lest you stray in your heart. Kol yemei chayecha, all the days of your life. V'adatam levanecha v'livnei banecha. Make them known to your children and your children's children. This is the mitzvah that is incumbent upon grandparents. Yom Asher Amadat Lifnei Hashem Elakecha b'Chorev, the day that you stood before Hashem at Chorev. Chorev is another word for Mount Sinai. Remember and don't forget. Teach your children and your grandchildren what happened to you when you were standing on Mount Sinai, not on Mount Sinai, but at Mount Sinai. That is a mitzvah incumbent on parents and grandparents. So we need to know what happened at Mount Sinai so that we can teach our children and grandchildren.
That says you were also one people who all stood together.
Correct.
One people.
Correct. And that is the only thing that keeps the Jewish people together is unity. When we are unified, good things happen to us. Unfortunately, when we're not, as we saw on October 7th, because I think the biggest area of disunity in our times was probably leading up to October 7th. The things going on in Israel were terrible. And the flip around has been phenomenal. There's a few fractures happening. There's always going to be differences between people. But it's, can we work together with those differences? To use that term that's being thrown around in South Africa now, national unity. It's being thrown around by the South African government. Whether it happens or not is another question.
Depends who you unify with.
Yeah.
Well, Grandma Alice says I'm
I
not
could send,
going.
Okay.
I could send someone from Melbourne to help them.
Go for it. You want to go? Go
Yes,
for
I'm
it.
shipping him out.
Okay. All right. So, Parshas Va'eschanan is where we have the Ten Commandments brought the second time. So that verse that we just read, those 2 verses, were Moses telling the Jewish people about the mitzvahs and about what happened at Mount Sinai. And he introduces it by saying, remember the day that you stood at Mount Sinai. Remember the day, and remember and teach it to your children and your grandchildren. Further along, he goes through exile and return, cities of refuge, and then we get to Revi'i chapter 5, and it says, Moshe called all of Israel and said to them, Shema Yisrael. Now this is not the Shema Yisrael that we say as in the mitzvah of saying Shema Yisrael, which is recognizing that Hashem is one. This is Moshe saying to the Jewish people, listen Israel. Jewish people, you're called Israel, listen. The decrees and ordinances that I speak in your ears today, learn them, be careful to perform them. Hashem our God sealed a covenant with us at Horeb, at Mount Sinai. Not with our forefathers that Hashem sealed this covenant, but with us. In other words, it's forever. We who are here, all of us alive today, face to face that Hashem speak to you on the mountain, from amid the fire. I was standing between Hashem and you at the time to relate the word of Hashem to you, for you were afraid of the fire and did not ascend the mountain. Saying, and then it goes through, Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzeitchem mitzrayim mibeis avadim. I'm Hashem your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slavery. And goes through the rest of the Aseres HaDivros. A little bit later in the Parsha, Shema and Vahafta are brought there. And the Ten Commandments brought here are slightly different to what was brought in Parshas Yisro, where they brought the first time in the book of Shmois in Exodus. What happened at Mount Sinai, or what happened leading up to Mount Sinai, is really what I want to talk about, and then we'll talk a little bit about Shavuos. Jewish people left Egypt on the 15th of Nisan. The next week they spent running around, going out and back and forwards, and landed up at Yam Suf, at it's translated often as the Red Sea, at the Sea of Reeds. They're standing there trapped between the mountains, between a false god and the sea, the god of the Egyptians, one of their gods, and the Egyptians are there bearing down on them, and the Jewish people don't know what to do. And essentially Moshe is davening, and Hashem says, now's not the time to daven, now's time for action. And Nachshon ben Aminadav, who we just learnt about as the leader of the tribe of Yehuda, walks in the water. He just jumps straight into the sea. And he's the leader. He takes that step, and the water gets up to his nostrils, and the sea split. We're not going to discuss the miracle of the seas in any depth of the splitting of the sea right now, but essentially the Jewish people walked through in 12 passageways. They had food, they had water, they had everything they wanted, and as they walked through, they walked on dry land. We say every morning Az Yashir, with a song that they sang after they got through, and that explains exactly what happened. Essentially, as we walked through, the sea was completely dry. The Egyptians came in their chariots, tried chasing us. It became muddy. They were swirled around. They were killed. Jewish people come out, whether it was on the other side or whether they just did a little loop. There's different opinions. Let's just say they did a little loop, came almost back to where they were. Washed up on shore were two things. One is the Egyptians, many of the Egyptians themselves, because the Jewish people were concerned that the Egyptians are going to keep chasing us. And each Egyptian that attacked a Jew, the Jewish person looked down and saw, oh, there's Ahmed that made me his slave. He's dead. He's not going to attack me ever again. And the Jewish people's hearts were then much more settled, able to go and receive the Torah. Also what was washed up on shore was all the jewels and gold and silver and things that the Egyptians adorned their chariots with, that they were wearing, that they were carrying. Jewish people were able to plunder that. Every Jewish person became a mega millionaire, let's put it that way, at that time. When they left Egypt, and then because the Egyptians lent them a whole lot of things, gold, silver, jewels, and clothing. And then, as well as at the sea. We then start walking towards Mount Sinai. And over the next 6 weeks, various different things happened. We got water, we complained. We ran 15 days, a month after we left Egypt, our food ran out that we took out with Egypt. Remember on Pesach, we say at the Seder that we put our food on our shoulders. Didn't have time to rise. That little bit of food that they were able to make, that little bit of dough they took, carrying on their shoulders, lasted for 30 days. That was man, essentially. It was miracle food. Then we complained. So Hashem gave us the man. Nothing's changed. We complain about everything. I want to know who is a wealthy man.
Satisfied with them.
A person who is satisfied with that. That's who's rich. Not somebody who's got 211 billion, I think is what Musk has got now, whatever it is. He's not rich. He might be materially wealthy. He might be able to buy as many jets as he wants. But is he satisfied? A person who's got a piece of bread to eat and is happy with that, he's rich. That's what Pirkei Avos says. Jewish people were rich. We were not quite satisfied at that time. We get through all these trials and tribulations. We've got the miracle of the man. We've got these miraculous clouds, Adonai Kavod, surrounding us, protecting us from everybody. Amalek did attack us in between because we were not unified. At one point in time, we were weaker. They attacked us. That's when our enemies attack us, when we're not unified. We've got the well of Miriam, the water, miraculous water coming out of a rock with rivers and streams running through the whole camp, feeding everybody water. The man, the way the man worked, the person who, let's put it this way, was sin-free, the person who was close to Hashem would come outside their tent in the morning and their man was waiting for them right there. Somebody who had a fight with the wife the night before and accused her of whatever, he shouted at her or shouted at the kids, he had to go searching for his man. And way out in the distance, he saw that man there. He realized the next day, let me just calm down, keep my temper, keep level-headed. I'm not going to do that, make that mistake again. Everybody at their level got their man. You know, if they were well-behaved, it was put in my school kid terms, it was right there. If they misbehaved, they had to go and get it somewhere else.
It's still parents that you
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
You were brought up
Misbehaving children don't get some kind of
for reward.
misbehaving, not reward. Consequence.
Say you don't-
Yeah,
you
no, don't give a reward, but there's consequence. For a person who doesn't keep Torah and mitzvahs is not going to be punished for what they didn't do. There are consequences to every action we have. That's why that comes in this world. We call it punishment, but it's a consequence. Okay. Then we get to Parshas Yisro. Yisro comes, he heard what happened, he heard about the splitting of the sea, he heard about Yisro being Moshe's father-in-law, who was the chief minister, the high priest of Midian. Moshe's wife and children, his two sons, were with Yisro in Midian. They didn't go back to Egypt. Aaron had said they were going back, Tzipporah and the boys were going back, and Aaron said, not a good place to bring the kids, and they went back. Yisro brings Tzipporah and Eliezer and Gershom, brings them to Moshe, and he comes along with. Whether this was before Matan Torah or after Matan Torah, it's a dispute amongst the Rishonim and the Gemara. Either way, they were part of the Jewish people, and Yisro himself converted. He comes to Jewish people because he heard about what Hashem did for the Jewish people leaving Egypt, going through the sea, and the war of Amalek. Then we're told, "B'chodesh hashlishi l'seis b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim b'yom hazeh ba'u midbar Sinai." On the third month, on the first day of the month, so we came to the children of Israel, came out of Egypt. On that day, on the third month, the first day, we arrived at Midbar Sinai, the wilderness of Sinai. They journeyed through various places. Moshe went up on the mountain, and Hashem said to him, "This is what you need to tell the Jewish people. You've seen what I did in Egypt." Goes through the whole thing, and Moshe is told, "Go back down and prepare for the giving of the Torah." We'd been growing, we'd been learning, we'd been given various mitzvahs along the way. We'd been given the mitzvah of Shabbos previously, for example. Several mitzvahs were given to us prior to getting to Mount Sinai. Moshe comes down. The way Chazal, the Midrash and the Gemara describe it is Hashem went to all the nations of the world. Now I'm going to summarize this into about one sentence what happened. But essentially he went to the one nation and he said to them, "Do you want the Torah?" And they said, "Well, what's in it?" He said, "Well, don't steal." He said, "Well, hang on, we live our lives stealing. That's our livelihood. That's what we do. So no, we're not interested." And he went to another nation and he said, "What's in the Torah?" And they said, "Well, don't commit adultery. Hang on. 5 wives is not adultery. They were allowed that, but 5 wives and my friend's 5 wives. And they said, well, kind of that's what we're about, because he went to the nations of Ammon and Moab were created by Lot's daughters sleeping with him. That's what our whole history is about. That's what we were about, they said. Interesting enough, Moab, that same Moab, great granddaughter, Rus Hamaviah. We read the book of Rus on Shavuos, because Rus was the perfect convert, and she then became the great-grandmother of King David. And so there's various reasons why we read Rus on Shavuos, but we essentially were converts. We became Jewish with the giving of the Torah. Going out of Sinai, going out of Egypt was like the engagement, and getting the Torah was getting married to Hashem, essentially. And so Moab plays a part in Mashiach. Mashiach's ancestor was Moab, who came from incest. At the same time, King David came from the union of Yehuda and Tamar, his daughter-in-law, who she tricked him to have a child with her because his 2 sons had died, and he didn't give the 3rd son to her. Again, it's a whole lot of negativity is built into the whole genealogy of Mashiach, of King David, of Shlomo, even King David himself. There's the stories about him, who he came from. The whole story of we're not allowed to marry someone from Moab. And there was a dispute. Does that mean that a Jewish man is not allowed to marry a Moabite convert? Or is a Jewish woman not allowed to marry a Moabite male convert? And the whole story with Rus, who married Boaz, who was the leader of the Jewish people, was all about that halacha. And Boaz, who was the leader, felt, no, it's okay for a woman because they didn't do any wrong. The men did wrong because when we were going through the desert, they didn't offer us food and water. Therefore, Boaz ruled that it applies to a Moabite man only that can't marry into the Jewish people. A Moabite woman can. King David's father comes along, and there's this dispute is still going on, and he decides that he's obviously tainted. There's a way of cleaning himself up. If he frees one of his slaves, makes her completely free and marries her, then his children from her will not be tainted. His other children will have that same tainted. And so he does this. He frees one of his slaves and marries her. But the slave is a very smart lady, and she says to his wife, Yishai's wife says, you go be with your husband. And the next thing they know, 3 months later, Yishai's wife, Yishai is separated from his wife, she's pregnant. And the product of that baby was David. And David was now sent out as a shepherd. All his brothers were the proverbial tall, dark, and handsome. King David was short, red-haired, and ruddy. Didn't look like the family. She must have been naughty. Then Shmuel the prophet, comes along and wants to anoint. He's told by Hashem, one of the sons of Yishai is going to be the next king. He comes along and he tries to anoint the first one, the second one, the third one, the sixth one, the seventh. He said, no, there must be another one. And they remember, there's that little David in the field out there. And Yishai anoints him as king. We don't know. We all come from, the message to me is we all come from some form of, there's been negativity in our lives, whatever it might be. We can all flip in 1 minute if we wanted to. We can all change the way we are very, very easily. Saying that is easy to say, but we know we can do that. Let's put it that way.
It's there if you want to.
Yeah, it's available to us. That's exactly right. I'm just looking through Let My Nation Serve Me, which describes most brilliantly from Rabbi Yosef Deutsch about the whole story of going through the desert, receiving the Torah, and the aftermath, the golden calf and everything else. And he brings here beautifully the whole offering of the Torah to the different nations. I just can't see it. I should have marked it. I was looking at it.
By the way, do they know exactly where Mount Sinai is?
No. The Christians believe there's a monastery on a mountain somewhere in the Sinai desert. The reason we don't know is because it only had temporary holiness. It was only holy for that time, specifically. And Hashem didn't want it to become a site of pilgrimage, because the Beis HaMikdash is that. There is an opinion that Hashem moved the Temple Mount, and that became the Mount Sinai, Chorev. I'll come back to that in a moment in terms of what happened. I just can't see exactly. I beg your pardon? That is Har HaBayis, that's the Temple Mount.
But
So-
we're not allowed to go there.
For different reasons. We're only allowed to go on the Temple Mount, into the temple complex, when we are completely pure. We are all what is called Tamei Mes. We're all impure from coming in contact with dead bodies. In order to become purified properly, we have to have the red heifer, the paraduma, to be sprinkled on us. We don't have that. We can't do that. So therefore, we can't become purified to go onto the Temple Mount where the actual walls of the temple were. The Temple Mount itself is actually much bigger than the temple. It's where the temple stood. There are, as far as I know, 13 opinions exactly where the temple stood. Whether the rock in that dome is the actual Evan Shasir, the foundation stone of the earth. That's where it is. That's where the earth was formed. That's where Adam Arishon and Chava came from. That's the first. The Evan Shasir is the foundation stone. And so, is that stone the actual stone, or is it somewhere else? Is it below there? We're not 100% sure. The 13 opinions are around that, and so there's different rabbis have drawn up plans. Let's put that of where the temple exactly stood, because there are slight differences, and they're very slight. The rabbis over the ages, including Rambam, have said we don't go up on the Temple Mount because we don't know which part is the part we can't go to. In our times, there are people who go up there, and what they do is they will go to mikveh, purify themselves as best they can. Obviously, we don't have a para aduma, therefore they can't become completely purified. And they go in areas where they know it's not the holy part of the Temple Mount. Because Herod 2,000 years ago extended the Temple Mount. That part where the Kotel is today is certainly the end part of it is Herod's extension of the. Let's take a step back. The Kotel is the outer retaining wall of the Temple Mount. There was another wall inside of that, which was the temple wall. And so that's quite far away. Hashem said in the prophecy, he will retain his Shekhinah, his presence, his spiritual presence in the Western Wall. And so it has extreme purity, extreme holiness. Which part of the Western Wall? Maybe all of it. If you ever go to the Kotel HaKatan, which is like right through the Arab Shuk, it's a small part of the Kotel that they've discovered. It's as close to the Evan Shasir, to the rock, as you can get as a Jewish person without going onto the Temple Mount itself. You can feel, I've certainly felt something very, very different at that point to what I feel at the Kotel. You go underneath in the Kotel tunnels. There's incredible spirituality there. In order we need to feel spirituality. Not everybody can feel it. It's a thing that people need to work on. I can't actually see what I was looking for, but let me just see if I can page through here very, very quickly, because there was one point I just wanted to bring, which in terms of offering the Torah to other people. I think I'll have to say it outside. One of the groups that were offered the Torah was Ishmael. Ishmael being the father of the Arab nations, and in fact, if you read the Quran, Akedas Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, where Abraham was told to take Isaac up, was on Har HaMoriah as well, and Yaakov's dream, where Yaakov slept, was there as well, the same place, and that's why the rabbis say that Har HaMoriah, the Temple Mount, was where the Torah was given. That was transported into the desert. This is all something well above our physical understanding of things. But the Quran says that it wasn't Akedah Yitzhak. They bring the same story. This was Akedah Ishmael. That's how far they went to change history. So we prepared ourselves for several days. We were told to prepare. Right now, there's 3 days of preparation before Shavuos. That's yesterday, today, and tomorrow. The 3 days of preparation before the giving of the Torah. Husbands and wives had to separate. People had to go to the mikveh. People had to do various things to make sure that we were in a state of purity in order to receive the Torah. I mean, we are going to be speaking, Hashem's going to be speaking to us face to face. Moshe comes to us, here we go. Moshe comes to all different nations, goes to Edomites, and he says to Edom, they say, what's written in it? And they say, what are you giving us? And Hashem says, don't kill. And they say, well, hang on a moment. We're killers. Esav, our father, our great-great-grandfather, was a murderer. Edom, Esav is the Roman Empire. The Western world today is identified with that. The exile we're still in is the Roman exile. Edom was Rome. He then goes to other nations, to every other nation, and it says here, Ishmael. What's in the Torah? Don't steal. He says to Ishmael. Ishmael says, well, hang on. Our great-grandfather Ishmael was an expert at liberating money and property from other people. I love the way he writes this. He was a famous highwayman. We're very proud of him. The Torah can't be for us. It's not good for us. Ishmael is described also as a Pere Adam. Pere Adam is an animal who's a man. Okay? Who his behavior is, even though he looks like a man, his behavior is completely animal-like. And that means we are uncontrollable in relationships with other people, taking what he liked, not particularly caring about the niceties of people's private property. Torah doesn't appeal to us. The bottom line is, I cannot in good conscience, as the guiding force of Ishmael, this is the angel Ishmael talking, accept rules that contravene the very nature of my people. Give it to the Jews. There we are told two things. One is Ishmael's very nature. That Pere Adam is in the Torah. When Ishmael is born, we're told he's a Pere Adam. And we're told here that we can't connect to people in a way of every other person. We just need to look at what happened on October 7, the way they attacked, killed, raped, etc., the Jewish people, the way they behave continually, the way that they go through these negotiations, the lying, the numbers that they quote, the number of people that are killed in Gaza, it's all a complete lie.
Before were released, they weren't released.
That was said by the ABC, excuse me. Yeah, and others. That was we get worse there. And they've infiltrated into the world basically through the universities and the press. If you do notice how the people have been killed in terms of men, women, and children, it's a straight line like this from October 7. It's like the graph is perfect. Every day Israel killed X number of men, X number of women.
But they can identify them in seconds.
They can't identify them in years. But anyway, we need to do the right thing. We need to be unified. We need to know that when we're unified, they can't attack us. It's as simple as that. Okay, let's jump to Matan Torah very quickly and what happened. Hashem comes to the Jewish people. And Hashem comes to Moshe, and Moshe says to the Jewish people, do you want to accept the Torah? And the Jewish people answer, Nasso v'nishma, the famous two words, we will do and we will hear. We will do what the Torah says, and then we'll hear about it. And in other words, Jewish people are about action. And that we've certainly seen after October 7. The doing of Jews has been incredible around the world. But in terms of Torah, we will do the mitzvahs you want to give us, and then we'll listen and understand a little bit more about it. Nishma is the same word as Shema. When we say Shema Yisrael, that means, we translate it as Hear, O Israel. I like to translate it as Hear, Jew boy. Listen, Jew boy, me. Hear, Shema means listen. It means hear, and it also means accept. we need to take it on. We need to accept that Hashem is Echad. Hashem is Elokeinu, Hashem is our God. And one day, Hashem will be Echad. He will be the one and only God in the world. With the coming Mashiach, everybody will recognize that Hashem is one. Okay, so we accepted the Torah. Moshe goes up, and Hashem says to Moshe, stand between, you don't come all the way up to Mount Sinai, stand between the Jewish people and me, that the Jewish people will see you and know that it's not you speaking, it is coming directly from me. Moshe's there, the elders are standing a little bit lower, the Jewish people below Mount Sinai. Hashem picks up the mountain, and that's where we learn out potentially that it was the mountain of the Temple Mount, and holds it above the Jewish people. Kar Hagigi, so holds this mountain up like a vat over the Jewish people, and says, if you don't accept the Torah, this will be your death place. In other words, we were told we have to accept it. Came along Purim time, and we accepted it voluntarily. That's when we accepted the whole Torah, the written, the oral, and everything voluntarily. At this point in time, even though we'd said Nasso and Ishma, it was pushed onto us as well. Hashem starts, the Jewish people, Moshe says to him, stay up all night. The Jewish people decide that prophecy is heard in sleep. Moshe was the only one who heard prophecy face to face from Hashem whilst he was awake. Every other prophet saw prophecy in some form of a dream. A dream today is regarded as some very low form of prophecy, depending how we interpret it. The Jewish people decided they need to go to sleep. Comes the early morning, and they're all still fast asleep. They had the most beautiful night's sleep, and Moshe has to go and wake them up. And Hashem was not happy with them. They should have been awake and ready. Hashem says, I'll still give them the Torah. The Jewish people are standing at the foot of the mountain. Moshe is at the bottom, a little bit higher up. The elders are between them. And Hashem says the first of the Aseret HaDibros. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. In fact, Hashem says everything, the whole Aseret HaDibros, both the way it's said in Yisro and the way it's said in V'yeschanan at the same time. How? Because Shabbos is Shamor and Zachor. It's both. It's the positive and the negative. It's God. It's remember and it's God. Shamor is remember, it's protect the Shabbos, and Zachor is remember Shabbos. The positive and negative mitzvahs on both sides. All of this was said together. Obviously, the Jewish people's neshamas were able to absorb it, but they themselves, on their level, couldn't absorb that. Hashem then slowed down, and he said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha asher hotzeichem me'etz Mitzrayim beis avadim. I'm Hashem your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slavery. He didn't say, I'm Hashem your God, who created the heaven and earth. Because we were in Egypt. We identified with God when He took us out of Egypt. We were able to see Hashem's hand when we were being taken through the sea. We'd seen Hashem with the man, with the water, with all these miracles. We knew exactly who we were dealing with here. We were dealing with Hashem, who took us out of Egypt. He was the creator of the world. It's also telling the world that the Jewish people, this is the people that Hashem chose as His people, by saying, you the people I took out of Egypt. I didn't take anyone else out of Egypt. The Jewish peoples, at this extreme level of connection to Hashem, their neshamas left their bodies and were thrown back a huge distance. Hashem resurrected them all, brought them back. Second of the Aseret HaDibros, Hashem says, don't reckon other gods in my presence. The Jewish people were thrown back. First two, and again, then Hashem resurrects them. The Jewish people said, we can't take this. We're going to die. This is the end of us. Moshe, can you please be our emissary, and can you please go up to Hashem and receive the rest of the Torah on our behalf and then teach us? Hashem agrees. We say in Pirkei Avos, the first Mishnah in Pirkei Avos is Moshe kibel Torah mi Sinai. Moshe received the Torah on Sinai. The word Torah has a numerical value of 611. There's 613 mitzvahs. The first two we received directly from Hashem. The other 611 Moshe received from on Sinai. And that's how we understand that Mishnah. So Moshe gives us the Ten Commandments. The Aseret HaDibros. I don't want to translate the Ten Commandments. Hashem gives us the Aseret HaDibros verbally. Moshe then gives it over to the people. Moshe goes up on Mount Sinai for 40 days and receives the entire Torah, the written Torah, the oral Torah. exactly what he received. That's all. It's a Gemara in Shavuos. We have a whole long Gemara and several pages explain exactly what happened with Moshe on Mount Sinai for 40 days. The angels accost him and say to Hashem, what's this Ben Adam doing here? What's this son of man doing up here? He's not an angel. And Moshe explained. They said, why are you giving the Torah? And Moshe has to explain. And Hashem tips Moshe off and he says, well, it says in Nasso, honor your mother and your father. Angels, do you have a mother and a father? Clearly the Torah is not for you. What it means that the angels had the Torah, that it was in heaven for hundreds and hundreds of generations, it's beyond the scope. But the Torah is something, it says that Hashem looked into the Torah and created the world. The Torah we have is something that we can understand to connect to Hashem. That's what Torah is, that's what mitzvahs are about. It's how do we connect to Hashem. So how do we connect to Hashem with mitzvahs on Shavuos? We don't. Shavuos, there are no mitzvahs. Pesach, we've got matzah, we've got the Seder, we've got described in the whole Exodus. Rosh Hashanah, we've got the Shofar, Yom Kippur, we've got fasting. Sukkot, we've got the Lulav and the Esrog and the Sukkah, we've got all these mitzvahs. Shavuos has no mitzvahs. Shavuos is called Atzeres. Shmini Atzeres is the Yom Tov also after Sukkot. It's just us and Hashem. How do we connect to Hashem? We connect to Hashem through learning Torah, which is why, one of the reasons why it's become such a big thing, learning through the night. One of the reasons for learning through the night is because the Jewish people slept in. So therefore, as a kapora, we learn through the night, if we can. In Melbourne, it's very difficult. You know, Yom Tov comes in at 5 o'clock, 10 to 5, and Neitzah Chama is at 7:32 the next morning. You can have a 4-hour dinner, and you're still only at 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And then you've got to sit learning between 10 and 7 to start davening at about 10 to 5 to 7. It's a very, very long night. And people are not used to it, and it ruins people's Yom Tov. So many of the Rabbanim say in Melbourne, you don't have to do it. You go up to north. I'm going to Calgary next week. There won't be a share next week or the week after. I'm going to Calgary. Yom Tov comes out at 11:07, I think it is, p.m. And first light is at 3 a.m. It's a very short night. You've got enough time to daven, go home, make kiddush, have a piece of bread, have a piece of meat, or I'll come back to, or dairy if you eat dairy at night. Go back to shul, learn a Mishnah, and daven Shachris. It's like finished.
It's a rush.
Exactly. There's not much time. Whereas here, we got a whole night. So if we're not used to it, many people don't do it. Absolutely, we're in the wrong, all in the wrong country. So
South Africa, they used to do it.
they do it here. Lots of people do it. My plan is to do it this year. Every year I work out differently, and we see how we go. We certainly have minyanim, Nate's minyanim, early morning minyan to daven with the sunrise in Melbourne. Many shuls have them. I would say most people in Melbourne don't daven Nate's on Shavuos morning because it's such a long night. It's a cold winter's night. There's a whole range of reasons why. But why do we eat milk on Shavuos? So there's several reasons brought. One of the reasons is the Jewish people were given the mitzvahs now. It's Yom Tov as well for them. They told us Yom Tov. They can't go and they up until this point in time, they were not necessarily shechting the animals properly and eating kosher food. They come to eat a meat meal, and we can't. We haven't got the ability to shecht properly. Our vessels are not kosher. So what can we eat? We can eat milk. That's one of the reasons brought. The land of Israel is described as Eretz Savas Chalav V'Vash, a land flowing with milk and honey. The Torah is a Torah of milk and honey. I'll say something quickly. I wasn't planning on saying this. I heard from Rabbi Gladstein the other day. I'll finish with that. But so therefore it's become a custom to eat milk for various reasons. There's many different customs. There's become a custom in some communities to eat 4 dairy meals on Shavuos. I will say quite categorically, that's wrong. Because I can't eat 4 dairy meals, it's ridiculous. No, because, I'll tell you why it's wrong. Because the Gemara says, Ein simcha ela b'yayin v'basar. There's no joy without having wine and meat.
Absolutely.
Now, it's really talking about the offerings, eating the meat of an offering and the wine that's brought. And so it's talking about that rather than us. But we don't have offerings today. We don't have the ability to eat from offerings or to give those things to Hashem. So therefore, Yom Tov is a time where we eat meat and drink wine.
Can you eat artificial meat?
That's not meat. Simple answer. To call it artificial meat is already not meat.
Yeah. No, my question is why, if you're vegetarian, why do you want to eat artificial? Why do
Because
you want to
everybody
eat meat?
needs to eat the right amount of protein.
Not through
So
artificial-
I'll tell you what I heard from Rabbi Gladstein. The Torah starts with the letter base, Parshas. The very last word in the Torah is Israel, ends with the Lamed, base and Lamed. The middle letters of the Torah are a Ches and a Vav, and the word Gachoin. And then the middle words in the Torah are Darash, Darash, a Dalet and a Shin. You take all those letters and you put them all together, and you got, the Torah is Chalav U'Davash, milk and honey. And so therefore we eat milk on Shavuos because the Torah itself, it is a time, in our davening we say, Zman Matan Torah Seinu, it's a time of the giving of the Torah. We didn't go into when the Torah was actually given. There's an interesting dispute which day the Torah was actually given. We know it was given on the Shabbos, and Moshe added another day, and there's a whole dispute in the Gemara about when the Torah was given. Was given on the 6th or 7th of Sivan. Either way, for us, out of Israel, the 7th of Sivan is second day Shavuos, so it is the time of the giving of the Torah. And we just need to know that we as human beings are, we learned in the earlier share this morning, are recreated every day. When we wake up in the morning, we are a new being. Yes, we're given all of our memories and everything else, and our whole life is still there, everything, but Hashem recreates the entire world every day. And we say this in our davening. And part of that recreation is us are recreated. So we have an opportunity every day to recreate ourselves and reinvent ourselves. The Torah is given on Shavuos, on the Yom Tov of Shavuos. And it wasn't only given in the year 2448 when we went out of Egypt, after coming out of Egypt at Mount Sinai. The Torah is given to us, it's re-given to us on Shavuos. The Torah we can learn and the Torah we can grow into for the year is given to us on Shavuos. And so we can attach ourselves to Torah on Shavuos by saying, I'm accepting the Torah on myself. But the laning of Shavuos is the 10 Commandments. In fact, there's an interesting question. We read the Aseret HaDibros 3 times a year. Once in Parshas Yisro, once in Parshas Ve'eschanan, and once on Wednesday morning on Shavuos. And so our job on Shavuos is to re-accept upon ourselves that Hashem gave us the Torah and is re-giving us the Torah. Please God, He should give us that Torah again new, that we should be able to live up to the type of people that we should all be.